A clerk lifts a thumb-sized jar from a locked glass case and sets it under the warm market light like a gemstone. The honey inside barely moves. It sits thick and dark behind the glass, with a handwritten label, a batch number, and a price that feels almost absurd for something most people squeeze onto toast without thinking. On the shelf beside it are other tiny jars: amber, gold, reddish-brown, nearly black. Some are sealed in dark glass. Some come with certificates. Some are sold in quantities so small they look less like groceries and more like medicine, perfume, or contraband. At first, it looks like luxury branding has found another ordinary thing to inflate. Honey is honey, after all. Bees make it. People collect it. The supermarket sells it in plastic bottles shaped like bears. Then the scene shifts. A rope ladder sways against a cliff in the Himalayas, hundreds of feet above the ground, while giant bees cling to a crescent of open comb. Smoke drifts upward. A harvester reaches out with a long pole, balanced between skill and empty air. A volcanic island rises from the South Pacific, so isolated that every shipment feels like a negotiation with distance. In a dry valley, ancient cider trees bloom for a short window, and bees work the flowers before the season vanishes. On a wind-swept moor, purple heather rolls across the hills, and the honey it produces becomes so jelly-like that ordinary extraction equipment struggles to remove it. In a cave, stories gather around comb hidden in mineral darkness, where the price can rise as much from mystery as from nectar. In a medical-grade processing facility, jars are tested, graded, traced, and authenticated, because the most expensive part of one honey may not be its sweetness at all, but the proof of what it really is. That is where the price begins to change shape. A jar of rare honey is not just a jar of sugar made by bees. It can be a place. It can be a season. It can be a narrow biological event that happened because a particular plant bloomed, in a particular landscape, during a particular stretch of weather, while a particular population of bees was strong enough to collect from it. And if any link in that chain fails, the honey does not exist. This is the hidden reason some honeys cost a fortune. Not because they are manufactured into rarity, the way luxury objects often are, but because they cannot be made on command. A company cannot simply order more cliff faces, more remote island harvests, more ancient trees in bloom, more heather flowering under perfect weather, or more Manuka nectar carrying the chemical markers buyers are willing to pay for. The scale is set by ecology first. People can package it, certify it, market it, ship it, and argue over its value. But bees have to make it before any of that begins. And bees do not respond to demand forecasts. They respond to flowers, sunlight, rain, colony strength, competition, disease, altitude, and the strange chemistry of nectar. That is why rare honey sits in a different category from ordinary premium food. The cost is not only about flavor. Sometimes it is about chemistry. Sometimes it is about danger. Sometimes it is about isolation. Sometimes it is about a texture so stubborn it changes the entire harvest, and sometimes it is about the human stories that grow around something already difficult to reach. The first of these rare honeys looks, at a glance, almost familiar. Manuka honey has become one of the best-known expensive honeys in the world, sold in pharmacies, health stores, and luxury food shops, often with bold numbers printed across the label. It comes mainly from New Zealand, and also from parts of Australia, when bees forage on Manuka plants, especially Leptospermum scoparium. But Manuka's price is not based on romance alone. Its value is tied to measurable chemical markers, especially methyl glyoxal, often shortened to MgO, which is associated with antibacterial activity. The higher the concentration, the more valuable certain jars can become. Suddenly, honey is not just being tasted. It is being tested. In New Zealand, Manuka honey is defined through a government-backed system that looks for a combination of chemical markers and DNA from Manuka pollen. The UMF grading system goes further, incorporating markers such as MgO, DHA, leptospirin, and others. This means a jar does not become expensive only because a beekeeper says the bees visited Manuka. It becomes expensive because the supply chain can prove it. That proof matters because demand is high, the flowering window is limited, and the landscape cannot be scaled like a factory floor. Bees may forage elsewhere. Rain can shorten a bloom. A strong season can become a weak season quickly. Even after harvest, the honey has to be handled, tested, certified, and protected from fraud. So the surprise is this. With Manuka, the rare ingredient is not only nectar from a specific plant, it is verified identity. That turns the jar into evidence. The buyer is paying for the bloom, the bees, the land, the chemistry, the lab result, and the traceable path from hive to shelf. It is a clinical kind of rarity, where the sweetness has paperwork. And once honey becomes something that must be proven as much as produced, the whole idea of value begins to shift. Because if one jar can be expensive due to chemistry and authentication, another can be expensive for a completely different reason: a tree, a desert season, and a reputation rooted in centuries. Sidr honey begins with a tree that can look almost impossibly tough against dry land. The cedar tree, often associated with Ziziphus spinochristi, grows in arid regions where shade itself can feel precious. Its honey is most famously linked with Yemen, though Sidr honey is also produced in parts of the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. What makes it valuable is not just that bees visit an old and revered tree. It is that the tree blooms for a limited period in a landscape where water, heat, transport, and tradition all shape the final harvest. The window can be short. The production is often small. The methods are frequently traditional. And in places such as Yemen, conflict, difficult roads, export limits, and instability can turn an already rare product into something even harder to obtain. So the cost carries more than nectar. It carries a landscape and a reputation that cannot be copied by planting rows of trees somewhere convenient and expecting the same result. Sidr honey is prized because it belongs to a cultural and ecological setting, and that setting does not scale neatly. Then the ground drops away. High in the Himalayas, honey can hang from cliffs in great exposed sheets of comb. The bees are often Himalayan giant honey bees, Apis laboriosa, building their nests on sheer rock faces in Nepal, India, Bhutan, and surrounding mountain regions. From below, the combs can look like dark crescents glued to stone, alive with movement. To reach them, harvesters may climb rope ladders, carry smoking torches, and use long poles to cut sections of comb into baskets. There is no polished retail calm here. There is wind, height, smoke, stinging insects, and the constant awareness that a mistake has consequences. The price of this honey is partly the price of access. Not shipping access, not certification access, but physical access to a colony living where humans were never meant to stand comfortably. Some Himalayan honeys may also contain granotoxins when bees forage on certain rhododendrons, adding another layer of unusual chemistry and risk. But the most important thing is not the danger as spectacle. It is the relationship. The harvest depends on local knowledge, seasonal timing, and restraint. If too much comb is taken, or colonies are disturbed too aggressively, the source itself is damaged. The cliff is not a factory. It is a living site, and the bees must return. After that, the tiny jar on the shelf no longer feels like an indulgence. It feels like the end of a long negotiation with gravity, insects, weather, and tradition. And then honey becomes stranger still. In parts of the Black Sea region, especially Turkey, and also in Nepal, there is honey known as mad honey. It comes from bees foraging on certain rhododendron species, including plants such as Rhododendron ponticum and related flowers. Their nectar can contain granotoxins, naturally occurring compounds that affect the human body. The effects are not folklore alone. Dizziness, sweating, nausea, vomiting, blurred vision, low blood pressure, and heart rhythm problems have all been documented. In severe cases, people require medical care. The concentration is unpredictable because it depends on the flowers, the season, the bees, and the mixture of nectar sources. That unpredictability is part of why it is controversial. Some traditions value it in tiny amounts, but the same property that makes it sought after can make it dangerous. In some markets, it is restricted or illegal. In others, it moves through specialty channels with a reputation that is half delicacy, half warning. Here, expense comes from a troubling kind of scarcity. The honey is valuable because it contains active natural chemistry, but that chemistry cannot be treated casually. The same synchronization of plant, bee, and season that can produce sweetness can also produce real medical risk. Far from those mountains and coastlines, another rare honey is expensive for a quieter reason. Pitcairn Island sits in the South Pacific as one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth. Its human population is tiny. Its production capacity is tiny. Its exports are tiny. Before the honey even reaches a buyer, distance has already entered the price. There are no vast industrial apiaries flooding the market from Pitcairn. The island's isolation has helped preserve a distinctive beekeeping environment, and its small scale means there is only so much honey to send out. Logistics do the rest. Every shipment has to cross an ocean of difficulty. This is rarity without cliff drama or dangerous toxins. It is simply the arithmetic of a remote place. Few people, limited hives, small batches, long shipping routes, and global demand pressing against a supply that cannot grow very much without changing the very thing people value. By now, the question has shifted. The mystery is no longer why a jar costs so much. The mystery is how it reached the shelf at all. On a Scottish moor, the wind combs through purple heather, and the bees move low over the landscape as if gathering color from the hills. This honey is not rare because it comes from a cliff or a cave or an island at the edge of the map. It is rare, in part, because when it is finally made, it refuses to behave. Heather honey, especially from Ling heather, Calluna vulgaris, is famous in places such as Scotland, Ireland, and Northern Europe. It can be fragrant, intense, and deeply tied to the late-season bloom of moorland plants, but its most unusual trait is mechanical. It is thixotropic. At rest, it can become gel-like, almost stubbornly set, and it does not pour or spin out of the comb the way ordinary honey does. That one physical property changes the work. A beekeeper cannot always rely on standard centrifugal extraction, where frames spin and honey flows outward. Heather honey may need special equipment, careful agitation, pressing, or other slower methods to coax it from the comb. The flower source has turned the harvest into a problem of texture. The bees have done their part, but the honey itself adds resistance, and the moor does not guarantee a crop. Heather bloom depends on weather, soil, timing, and the health of the landscape. Too much rain, too much cold, a weak nectar flow, or poor colony strength can reduce the season before it ever reaches the extractor. So the cost gathers in layers: a narrow bloom, a demanding environment, skilled beekeeping, and a honey that seems almost unwilling to leave the wax. Then the story slips underground. In Turkey, reports of so-called elvish honey and other cave honeys have become famous for their extreme prices and mysterious settings. Some stories describe honey found or harvested from caves near the Black Sea region, with claims of jars selling for thousands of dollars per kilogram. Those figures are difficult to verify consistently, and prices can shift with marketing, rarity, and attention. But the fascination is real. The image is powerful. Comb hidden in darkness, mineral walls, difficult access, ropes, climbing, tiny quantities, and a honey presented as something almost geological. Sellers may describe it as mineral-rich because of the cave environment, though specific health claims should be treated with caution. Scarcity is one thing. Proven medicine is another. This is where rare honey becomes complicated. Bees, flowers, and landscapes may begin the value, but humans finish it. A cave can be difficult to reach. A harvest can be genuinely limited. But a name, a legend, a viral story, and a luxury market can push the price far beyond the biology alone. The most expensive honey stories often live at the edge between evidence and mythology. Some of the rarity is physical, some is ecological, some is logistical, and some is belief, attached to a jar so strongly that the jar becomes more than food. Back in the market, the small jars still sit behind glass. The labels still look delicate. The prices still look strange. but they no longer seem like simple exaggerations of a pantry staple. One jar may contain the tested chemistry of a Manuka bloom. Another may carry the short flowering of cedar trees in a dry landscape shaped by history and conflict. Another may come from comb, cut from a Himalayan cliff. Another may hold the dangerous chemistry of rhododendron nectar. Another may have crossed the world from a tiny island in the South Pacific. Another may have fought the beekeeper with its own jelly-like texture. Another may be wrapped in the darkness and uncertainty of a cave story. The question has changed from why anyone would pay that much to what had to happen for this to exist at all. Honey is familiar only on the surface. It looks simple because it arrives finished, sealed, and sweet. But before the jar, there were flowers opening for a brief moment, bees strong enough to find them, weather that either helped or ruined the flow, people who knew when to harvest, and roots difficult enough to make every ounce matter. Bees do not make luxury goods. They make use of a season before it disappears. Humans arrive later with glass jars, certificates, claims, auctions, and prices. Some of that value is careful and justified. Some of it is inflated by desire. But underneath the market is a quieter truth. Honey can be a record of place and timing, concentrated until a landscape fits in the palm of a hand. The clerk slides the tiny jar back into the case, and the amber inside catches the light again. It is still honey. But now it also looks like weather, distance, labor, risk, flowers, and a vanished season held behind glass.